Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to today's video. Today, we'll be talking about why shyness is seen as an unattractive trait in men, and I brought my fiancée on board. So here she is. I know you guys really like it when she's on board, and she's back from medical rotation, so let's welcome her home. So shyness, I know I made a video covering this topic, but we're gonna dive deep and kind of explain the difference. I think one thing we want to talk about is shyness versus being quiet. I think one of my subscribers made a really good point. I think being quiet, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, right? It's kind of like you're choosing to be silent because you have nothing to say. And I think it's better to say nothing than sometimes act like a fool and act like you know what you're talking about. I think shyness is like fear is holding you back because you're afraid of rejection. You're afraid of what people think about you. You're afraid of how they see you, right? I think that's one thing a lot of men struggle with is shyness. And I know Hadley and I were having a conversation before this is shyness. What is it and why is it unattractive? I think shyness is one of these things that you have to take immediately. When you see someone who's shy, especially as a woman, you want to have a conversation, you have to kind of use that information that's given to you and you take that even further and you infer who they are, how they act, and if they're the right type of man for you. Because I think we were saying, like, if you're a man, a high quality man, and you can't even say hi to me or start a conversation because you're very shy and you're afraid of rejection, it's like, how can you necessarily trust them to have a relationship and if they're willing to stand up for you? I know I talked about protection, and I'm not saying like, you know, the guy is the ultimate source of security for the woman and stuff. You know, I feel like to each their own, they can hold their own value. But generally speaking, as a man, like, you want to protect the ones you love. You want to lead. You want to make decisions for the family or the couple and the relationship. It's not like saying the woman doesn't have an opinion on that, but there's something great about having a man take the lead. And I wanted to ask Hadley, so why do you think guys struggle with shyness?
I think they just lack confidence in themselves and who they are.
Okay.
That's what it portrays to me.
Mm-hmm. How do you view shy guys? Like, are they invisible? Like, how do you look at that?
I don't think they're necessarily invisible, but I think in a conversation, shyness to me signals more of a friendship than a potential relationship, at least in my head.
Yeah, totally. I think we were talking about this when I first met you, is when you're shy, you kind of put yourself in the friend zone route because you're afraid to make a mistake. You're afraid to lose the conversation. You're afraid to lose the girl. And that comes from a scarcity mindset of when you're so afraid of making a mistake, you don't believe there'll be another situation like this again. You truly believe this is the end all be all. And that's a scarcity mindset, is you're so afraid of losing it. You're so afraid of messing it up that you're not memorable. You're not being yourself. And I think that's one thing you said earlier is when I first met you, I wasn't afraid of losing you because I was like, I have the belief in myself and I want to have a great conversation with you. And if this doesn't go the way I want it to, necessarily like in the terms of, oh, are we compatible or not? Do I have to sacrifice what I believe in, what I think is funny? What's the point of that? And I think that's a really good method, is when you are shy, you're afraid of losing it all because you don't have trust in yourself that you're able to meet another great person. And outside of relationships, this goes to like friendships as well. So one question I have is, what would you recommend to guys who are really shy? What would you say?
I think it starts in the core belief in yourself. So I know for you, when I met you, I was like, wow, this guy is amazing. He's confident in himself. It's obvious he believes in himself. You didn't try to put on a show or act like anything, like you were trying to get something from me. Mm-hmm. You didn't portray that. You portrayed just confidence in who you were. And to me, that made me think, oh, wow, this guy's a great catch. I really like this guy. If I really like this guy, what can I do? What can I say to keep him around? I was like, he's a catch. Yeah. What can I do to ensure that like maybe he would go on a date with me?
Yeah, and I think this all started in the terms of the approach, right? The whole point is if you can get the approach right of like, oh, I'm going to go talk to this individual and have a great conversation. What am I portraying is I'm not afraid to see where this night goes. I'm not afraid where this conversation will lead. I'm not afraid of, oh, if it dies out or there are awkward silences or ums and buts. What happens is if you're confident in the approach, it shows that like you're capable of having a great conversation. And I know there's a lot of videos which tries to teach guys to hype themselves up, be like, how do I get so confident where I can go approach someone so I can do my pickup artist techniques? And that's the wrong thing. Is if you're hyping yourself up just to go say cheesy pickup line that doesn't necessarily work, you're not gonna have a great conversation. But going there to the point like I want to meet someone, and I think this comes down to the idea of general attraction. One thing we really want to point out is you can approach all the people you want, but if there's not like a set criteria of like, oh, I'm attracted to you, you're attracted to me, then what's the point? Because a lot of people can have great conversations, right? If salesmen walk up to you and they want to have a conversation, you're like, what is it? But the whole point is you have to be generally attracted, and looks actually do matter. There has to be something in the beginning. And one thing I was telling Hadley earlier is we all are so busy. We all have lives, we have things to do. And of course you can infer like, okay, maybe he's shy, maybe he can be a great partner, maybe in the future he will change and take the lead and be the man that I want. What happens is we're so busy. We have to take shortcuts, right? We have heuristic biases that we need to use or life is going to be incredibly stressful. If you have to take someone at hand and infer and be like, maybe in the future it'll be great, that's an exhausting process. But as a woman, like you were talking about earlier, is you generally like to be approached versus approaching someone else.
I think that's one thing we've talked about a lot, is that if there's two people that are shy, that are compatible, they might never meet because someone has to overcome that. And I think for me, and it's different depending on what you want, this is what works for us. Yeah. I think our gender roles are a lot more traditional. Yeah. Our values are a lot more traditional. So for me, I really wanted you to approach me. You approached me, you were confident, and that put me at ease and made me feel really comfortable. Even the little things, like we walk down the street, the people that stand out there with the clipboards, I hate those people. They always trap me in conversation. And I know like walking with you, you're like, hey, no, we're good. And you took care of the situation so I didn't have to. Yeah,
I think that's a great point. I mean, the whole point is there has to be first contact, right? There's a lot of people, even our friends were talking about, where he said, I will never talk to a girl. I want them to approach me because a high quality woman will approach a high quality man. And that might be true. And if you're happy with that result, keep doing that. But the thing is, not a lot of women actually approach high quality men, the type that you want. And maybe you do, and you want a more dominant, assertive, independent woman, and that works for you. But if you're patiently waiting for a girl to approach you and you're not happy with your life, then you have to do something else. Because what happens is we know really great women, we know really great men, but no one approaches each other. So how do you even take the time to even build a connection? And you're missing the opportunities to approach. Like, yes, you both are staring at each other across the room, but none of you guys are talking. Then what's the point? And I'm not saying this is a general like rule and it works for everyone. This is a general guideline that we want to say, hey, if you're seeing someone that's giving you cues of attraction, go and start that conversation as a man. Because what happens is you're controlling the initial conversation flow. The ball's in your court, because if you start a conversation, you can end the conversation and you can steer it any direction you want to, right? And I think as a man approaching a woman, make it man to woman, having like that flirtatious vibe versus just going through the friend zone route. Because what happens is if you're truly shy and you're fucking terrified of rejection, you're like, okay, I'd rather play it safe and be her friend. And maybe over time I can establish myself as a great partner. And maybe during the course and duration of a relationship, you'd be like, oh my God, he's the most amazing guy ever. I want him to be my boyfriend. That's how guys think. We think the longer we stay in this friend zone, that she'll realize how great of a partner we are. And the truth is, if it takes time for someone to realize your worth, they don't see any of it, that's probably not a good sign.
Well, I think as a girl, you kind of categorize people and you're like, okay, this guy's going to be my friend. And then that puts the guy in a bad position of being friends with someone, and you have to have so much confidence to go up to a girl at that point and be like, hey, I know we've been friends for a year now, but I actually really like you, always have, and I think we should date. That fear of rejection is way higher than if you just did it on the front end and said then as a girl, you're sitting there and you're like, well, did you ever want to be my friend? Or was this always your end goal? Why didn't you tell me this at the beginning? Why didn't you tell me your expectations?
You definitely question the validity of the relationship. You're like, well, was he being friends with me for who I am and then he just caught feelings? Or was he just being a friend with me because he's afraid to fucking tell me how he feels and if he likes me? And that's the worst thing, is because now you're playing it safe because you're not confident enough and you're shy. But now you have to double down and make that difficult move to prove that, hey, I'm a man, I like you. And that takes a lot more courage. And the thing is, I don't think that really works. I don't know that many success stories where a guy went through the friend zone or friendship method and then like told the girl they like them. A lot of it is, Hadley was saying, is they're not even seen as a compatible partner because you're seen as a friend. You're not seen as a sexual partner. You're not seen as a boyfriend. You're kind of seen as like the guy who's like a teddy bear.
Or like kind of like another girlfriend almost. I think then it brings up all these questions. Then you're like sitting there and like, well, I've never thought of you in that way. I guess now I will try to think of you in that way to see if it'll work. But that's so different from when I met you. Yeah. Like a few sentences into our conversation, I knew that this was a guy that I wanted to date, and I wanted to do anything possible to increase my chances of that.
Yeah, I think it was great because when we first met, the intention was set clear. It wasn't like verbally said like, hey, I really like you, let's date. That wasn't like the first thing, but the vibe was there. It was like the conversation, the flirtiness, the body language. You absolutely knew when I was talking to you, it's like, hey, we're kind of vetting each other and courting each other and to see if we want to be a potential partner. It wasn't just non-sexualized, like professional conversation, like, oh, what color do you like? What's your favorite movie? Yeah, we were talking about topics like that, but it was like in a manner of, I want to date you, I want to see your interest. And it was a vetting thing. And what I'd like to say is, shyness is one of those things we all struggle with. Like, I'm still sometimes have social anxiety. Yeah, I would say like maybe I'm shy, but you have to conquer that fear because if you're too shy to approach, you're probably too shy to express your true opinions. And that comes down to the idea of people pleasing and being a nice guy is maybe you're not expressing your true opinion and voice because you don't think people like you for the way you actually think. And what happens is if you don't stand for what you believe in, how does anyone actually trust you? Because you're so moldable, you're too influential. And it's like your opinion changes from one thing to another. Not like your opinion doesn't change in life. You know, I've been wrong on things, which I've changed. But it's like, if you're afraid to express yourself, how do I really know who you are?
We tend to view shyness as an intrinsic personality trait, but it's something that's not static. You can change that.
Yeah.
And so just because you're shy, I mean, you used to be way more shy than you are now.
Yeah, and I think one of the things is a cultural value. I think shyness is something that's not intrinsic, right? It's not innate. It's something that was taught to us and it's environmental. You know, growing up in an Asian background, we're kind of taught to be a little more polite, humble, and it's okay being typically quiet. There's nothing wrong with that. But if shyness gets to the point where you can't stand up for yourself, initiate conversation, say no, leave a conversation, voice your opinions in spite of what people think, then that truly impacts you. And shyness is one of the things where it's fear, rejection, and you want to be approved. And you have to learn to get your source of approval from yourself, which is something we all struggle with. And that's a hard thing, but it's habit. It's a point of, I'm going to continually do that and be met with successful results, which reinforces this good behavior. But the whole point of what we're trying to say is a lot of guys see people they want to talk to, especially women that they think they're compatible with based on their appearance, the way they dress, the environment they're in. Like, think about it. If you're in a cafe sitting there and see a girl reading like manga or, you know, comic books and you really love that, you already identified someone who has a similar interest. And it takes a certain individual to like those things. And you should go and talk to them and start that conversation. Like, think about, she's typically, if she's reading a comic by herself, she's choosing to be alone. Maybe she's a little shy herself or necessarily more introverted and quiet. But if you don't bridge that gap, then you're not giving yourself that chance or opportunity to meet someone which can blossom in that relationship, which we all crave. We all crave the intimacy and we want to have a partner. But if we never take the action, then it's like, what's the point sometimes?
Right. I think the real issue is authenticity. Like, you showed up as your authentic self. And that's what's so almost addicting. Like, people crave it. You meet someone that's authentic and is themselves. They don't really care what other people think. That's very obvious.
Yeah.
They are authentically themselves. They show up that way. You immediately trust that person. You want to talk to that person. You want to figure out what they like to do. They are able to speak passionately about the stuff they're interested in.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the resources for confidence or how to develop confidence in areas that maybe aren't something that is reflective of you. Like, you don't need to go up and say some crazy pickup line that you don't believe in. That's not something that works.
I think one of the great points you said was being authentic displays strength. Because the fact that being authentic in this world where everyone's trying to mold you and silence you and change your view because it's controversial, but when you're actually being genuine to who you are, what you're showing is, I've endured belittlement. I've endured people ostracizing me, people not liking me for me. What you're saying is, I don't care. And that's the ultimate sign of strength of being like, to be yourself in this world that's continually trying to change you is showing a lot of power and strength, because you realize to get to that point, to not care what people think, that takes a lot of mental effort and a lot of belief in yourself. Because what happens is, if people talk you down, think, oh, I don't like you because you're too vocal, you kind of, you know, break the social mold. But if you're able to conquer that, you're showing that, like, I'm okay in my own skin. I'm okay being Asian, in my case. I'm okay with being who I am. I'm okay with the hobbies I like. And I understand that a lot of people don't like these certain things. But the whole point is, being authentic takes tremendous grit, endurance, and strength, and perseverance in the belief that I am capable of meeting great people. That is a great point.
Yeah. I think on our first date, you talked about beekeeping, and I was like, who the hell does beekeeping? Yeah. And I was like, that is the most random hobby I've ever heard, but you were passionate about it. I learned a lot about bees. I've never had a reason to learn about bees. It was really great. And I think, you know, there's a lot of guys that if you go out to bars, there's a lot of like cookie cutter chads, right? That are like confident. They approach you at a bar. They're the same. It's the same story over and over. And it's like these cookie cutter people. You're like, yeah, maybe you're a different person, but I've heard it all before, seen it all before. Yeah. And you were so unique and so like confident in yourself. That's what I was attracted to. And we had a lot of common interests and common grounds and like hit it off. And I'm sure that's the other thing too, is when you're authentically yourself, you're going to get rejection more often as
Yeah, well, I mean, your quantity of viable partners in conversations, it drastically goes down because a lot of people can't relate. But that belief in yourself, you're like, yeah, I've had a lot of people that don't like these things. They're trying to tear me down and put me down. But I don't really care, because all it takes is one. It takes one good conversation to change your entire life. And to the point of cookie cutters, like, yeah, like, you know, that's when the consulting bros and the Patagonia vests come true, or the military guys. It's because we rely on these stereotypes because we believe that by being ourselves, we can't be loved. And that comes back to like a childhood trauma thing of trying to get approval from your parents, because every time you try to voice your concerns, you probably were met with disdain, anger, resentment, gaslighting. So if this is what you've been taught as a kid, of course you're not going to believe it. Because if you keep voicing your opinions and concerns as a kid, they're not being met. You're saying, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. Anytime I try to speak up, express my concerns, and have help, they're never met. So if I adopt the people-pleasing mentality, I am rewarded with a lot of approval from people. Which then you're just people pleaser. You're a nice guy.
Yeah. And I think the amazing thing for you is when you showed up like that, it gave me permission and like the feeling of safety to be myself and to kind of let my guard down. And then I showed up as who I was. And then it was a way more authentic interaction. And then you're not stuck in this situation where you're both pretending to be someone you're not, and you find out months later that you're really not that compatible.
Yeah, you're like trying to tell the other person, it's like, I'm being vulnerable by being myself. It's okay to let your guard down. Let's have this vulnerable conversation. But I think that, like you said about beekeeping, yeah, one of those things was kind of like, I kept that to myself because a lot of people don't like it. But at a certain point, I was like, as I grew up and matured, I was like, no, these things make me happy. These quirkiness, these quote unquote imperfections make me me. And I think that was the greatest gift, was not everyone's going to like you. And some people don't like these videos, and that's okay. But that's the whole point, is you got to give yourself a shot, because there's no other way to meet people if you don't express and expose yourself, right? I'm not saying to necessarily go out and talk about your childhood traumas to every random stranger. There's definitely a point of opening up with someone you really trust, and like, hey, this is what happened to me. This is, opening up. That's a great vulnerability, right? But vulnerability can only be met with strength. You kind of display that, like, outside of it, you have a good grip on your internal trauma, childhood trauma, your insecurity, because we're all fucking insecure. You know, in the same way, when I say shyness, I'm not saying you have to be perfect. I'm not saying, oh, I'm not insecure. Well, we all are insecure, but the whole point is, I'm insecure, but I'm still going to do it because I really like what's going on over here, and I want to meet this individual.
Right. And I think there's a level of mystery. Like, I remember when we were first dating, and still this happens. There's like more that I find out about you. Yeah. And I think our first interaction kind of set the tone, where I was like, I want to know more. It's like reading a really good book. You're like, I want to know more. I want to keep reading. I want to keep figuring it out. And that's kind of how that spark started. Yeah. And I remember I saw you, and like, yes, knew you were attractive. I was like, well, that guy is attractive. And then,
Thank you.
Yeah. But, I was like, oh, well, I'm generally shy too. So I was like, oh, well, he'll never talk to me. And I'm sure if he does, he'll just be like a normal finance bro. And like, there's going to be nothing there.
Yeah, I think the whole point, one thing that really stood out when you were talking was the whole idea of shyness. Shyness doesn't necessarily apply to social scenarios. It applies to yourself, because I allowed myself to be weird, to do these things, right? Mm-hmm. Beekeeping, cigar smoking, getting into wine. Mm-hmm. These things I really allowed myself to explore, because I was like, I'm not shy of myself anymore. I want to see who I am, the things I think of a high quality man. That's the things I really thought were. And to be a high quality, it's almost ironic, because you have to do these things for yourself, because it gives yourself a very enriching life and full of life experiences. So when you do meet someone, you actually have hobbies, you have traits, you have things you enjoy, you have a friend group, and you have interests and passions to like legitimately talk about. But it starts with expressing yourself in your own private life, of exploring music, things you really wanted to do, but some people's opinion held you back from exploring these options. And that's the great thing, is to just stand there and be like, okay, I'm not going to be shy when I go out in the social scenario. You're asking for an impossible task. It starts in everything you do. And I keep repeating this. It starts with the way you order your coffee. If someone messes it up, it's like, hey, no, you actually poured regular milk when I said oat milk. And just expressing that. Because if you start these small habits of voicing your concerns, it's going to be easier, because when you finally go out, you're like, I've been doing this all day. It's the same thing. Expressing your concerns to your boss, your friends, to the barista, and then trying to go express your concerns by approaching someone. I think that's the ultimate way. It's the ultimate gift. And of course, there's a lot of intricacies, right, that we're not touching. This is a general guideline where we just talk about things we're thinking about, and we'll make part 2 and part 3 of these things. So we're not saying we know it all. Look, I'm 25, she's 24, we're young. But the whole general guideline is shyness should not hold you back. And understand the mental hoops and the anguish of trying to hype yourself up, and the sheer terror of your heart is racing in your heart trying to just go talk to someone. But the thing is, I don't know, the reward's always great, because even if it doesn't go your way, at least you did something, and now you're reinforcing good behavior. Like, that wasn't as bad as I thought. Rejection is never as bad as you imagined. It's not.
You can honestly view it as a good thing. If someone rejects you, you're like, oh, well, this person doesn't like who I am. Why would I want to hang out with them?
Yeah. And it comes back to the, bringing this full circle, was we have a good guy friend who's very attractive. And he says, I will not approach a girl. She has to approach me. And my whole point was, how's that working for you? Are you happy with that result? And if you're happy with just patiently waiting, and you're content, and you're enjoying your single life, that's one thing. That's amazing. But if you're not meeting someone, and that's your way of meeting someone, actually, as ironic as that sounds, then something has to change. Because there's a lot of great people who are both shy, but someone has to bridge that gap. And maybe you could meet in the middle. And maybe that one day could happen. But continually waiting and you're discontent, something has to be changed.
Yeah, you have more control than you think.
Yeah. So if you guys want to talk about this further, please email me at bedroomtalksconsult@gmail.com. Give up for Hadley. She did a great job. If you want to see what we're up to, we've posted on Instagram a lot, at m.deep20 in the description below. As always, I wish you the best. Namaste. Peace out.